Gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Dr. Chung, EVP and Engineering Dean, Purdue University Founding Director, Center for Tech Diplomacy at Purdue, Purdue University.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Meng Chang. I'm the EVP and Dean of Engineering College at Purdue and founder of Center for Tech Diplomacy. As a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, we focus on the bidirectional interactions between technology and U.S. foreign policy. We believe that technology must advance freedom. Part of our work is to train American diplomats with engineering discipline. And the other part is to provide domain expertise in critical technologies to foreign policy makers. For example, next week, we're launching our first year-long study, the Task Force on the Global Roadmap to 6G, engaging the private sectors and co-chaired by Manisha Singh and me. Today's topic is on semiconductors and the rise of the chip diplomacy. And I'm honored to bring to stage Keith Krach, who has been a transformational leader in that and many other sectors. Keith Krach created the category of B2B e-commerce as the co-founder and CEO of Ariba, which transacts over $37 trillion a year of business. He was also the CEO of DocuSign, used by over 1 billion people around the world. He was formerly the chairman of the board of trustees at Purdue University and had the rare distinction of being unanimously confirmed to the nonpartisan Undersecretary of State position in the United States government. And therefore, it is a great privilege that he has agreed to serve as the chairman of the board for the Center for Tech Diplomacy. So ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome to Undersecretary Krach. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Monk, so much for that kind introduction. It's an honor to be back here at Concordia and share with you my experience as Undersecretary of State and also this new form of transformational diplomacy. You know, it was just a few years ago, my last trip to China while I was serving as CEO of DocuSign. And I've been going there since 1981. I'm a lover of Chinese history, culture, the people. But this time it was different. What I could see was the Chinese Communist Party was amping up their techno-economic competition into a new form of aggression. When I was flying back on the plane, I thought to myself, hey, I wonder what the leaders in Washington know about this. I went a week later. That's when I was asked to serve as Undersecretary. And that was a dream I never knew I had. So I'm thinking, okay, what's the charge? Well, the charge was to develop and operationalize a global economic security strategy to drive economic growth, maximize national security, and combat the Chinese Communist Party's economic aggression. Now, I was grateful for that unanimous confirmation and getting that bipartisan stamp, because the reality that we face as a nation and the free world is one of ever-increasing cyber warfare with seemingly ceaseless, intense variations, and perhaps weaponized economic competition, because the Chinese Communist Party is playing a long game, and they're playing for keeps. A game of four-dimensional economic, military, diplomatic, and cultural chess with little regard for human rights, intellectual property, the environment, or sovereignty of nations. So there was no doubt in my mind, what's the first step I need to do? Well, it's just like when you're the CEO. It's all about building a high-performance team. And what I learned is the organization with the best people wins. And diversity of thought is the catalyst for genius. Now, I had some of the finest foreign service officers working on our team. And I can tell you, they're some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. They speak 4 to 7 languages. They work their tail off. And their North Star is national security, regardless of what's going on domestically or overseas. Now, one thing that they haven't experienced is technology competition like we have in Silicon Valley and getting bloodied on that field. So I did something that they told me was unprecedented. I brought in 12 private sector, results-oriented executives, technologists, entrepreneurs, Hmong being one of those. And then what I did is I hooked them up together. We joined them together and combined them to work together. And I'll tell you, it was magical. In Silicon Valley, we call that a 60-60 deal. Bringing the best together, these Silicon Valley battle-scarred veterans with the finest diplomatic corps in the world. And, you know, I could talk on and on about their different accomplishments. We'll be talking some tomorrow about the largest onshoring in U.S. history to secure the semiconductor supply chain. But I want to focus on a situation that was dire and urgent. And this was back in February 2020. And it was the CCP's master plan to control 5G. You see, 5G is more than just that smartphone. It's about controlling utility grids, power generation systems, sanitation systems, manufacturing processes, Internet of Things. And it looked like China's national champion, Huawei, their most important company, and the backbone for their surveillance state and the enabler of the genocide that's going on in Xinjiang. It looked like they were going to run the table. They had just announced 91 deals. 47 of those were in Europe. And we knew we needed to create a different form of statecraft. So what we did is the same thing we do when we build companies out in Silicon Valley and transform industries. We created a playbook, which is a vision, mission, principles, objectives, strategy, all boiled down to execution, because you need that alignment to be able to execute. If there's anything I saw, there's a big gap in government between policy and execution is the key. Now, out of that, the mission was the same mission that I gave an answer to in my confirmation hearing when Senator Coons asked me, what would be your China strategy to combat their aggression? And it's all about harnessing U.S.'s three biggest areas of competitive advantage by rallying our allies and our partners, leveraging the innovation resources of the private sector, and amplifying the moral high ground of democratic values. Now, that mission then gave us the vision, and that was to build an alliance of like-minded countries, companies, and civil society that operate by a set of trust principles for all these areas of economic collaboration to advance freedom and stand up against authoritarianism. Now, those trust principles were the same as our democratic values, and they were things like respect for rule of law, respect for property of all kinds, respect for sovereignty of nations, respect for the environment, respect for human rights, and putting a premium on accountability, integrity, transparency, reciprocity. These are things that we honor in the free world, but the Chinese Communist Party does not. And if you look at them, they all equal trust. And you know what was interesting for me? This is my first 60 bilaterals with my foreign counterparts, economic ministers, finance ministers, foreign ministers. When I'd meet with them, I'd say, hey, how's your relationship with China go? And they all say the same thing. They go, you know, they're a really important trading partner. And it seemed like almost every time they look both ways, they go, but we don't trust them. Now, that rang bells in my head because just a year before, I've been standing up on stage at DocuSign saying, hey, we're not in a software business. We're in a trust business. We deal with people's most important documents. Those are the ones that you sign. And we're providing a trusted service. We might not take ourselves seriously, but trust is sacrosanct. It's also the most important word in any language. You do business with people you trust. You buy from people you trust. You partner with people you trust. So I'm thinking, well, 5G is the ultimate trust business. And when we went around to different countries and talked to different global telcos, we would say, who do you trust with your citizens' data? Who do you trust with your company's proprietary technology? who do you trust with your government's most precious information? Is it the Chinese Communist Party? The answer was invariably no. And so trust was at the heart of everything, at the heart of our objectives. So only 25% of those objectives were to defeat the CCP's master plan, because it looked like they were going to run the table. In this process, we wanted to do was to use 5G as a beachhead to build that alliance of democracies, to create an enduring, duplicatable, repeatable strategy. We had 10 criteria for that to use in all these different areas of economic collaboration. In order to do that, we needed a transformational strategy. So in Silicon Valley, we transform people's lives and transform industries. And the objective of the game is to be the category king. Because if you're the category king, you get 80% of the market resource, you get 80% of the market valuation. And in a rapidly changing market, everybody wants to go with the leader. And in that market, leadership is not defined by size, it's defined by momentum. And Huawei had all the momentum. And so the object of the game was to reverse the momentum and replace theirs with ours. And one of the other key things about this was the reason why U.S. government efforts were failing is we're going around the country banging on tables with government leaders and saying, don't buy Huawei. Now, nobody wants to be told what to do. So I said something that ended up being novel in government, but was second nature to us from the private sector. So why don't we just treat these countries and these telcos like customers? And the customer's always right. And you've got to have a value proposition before you can get them to partner with you. And that's exactly what we did. And that was novel in government. Another thing that was novel was our multidimensional go-to-market strategy. And that is calling all the way up and down the food chain. See, we didn't just call on government leaders. We called on the foreign telco CEOs. I mean, we had relationships with them. A lot of them had invested in DocuSign. We'd partner with them for years. And that really, I think, showed the beauty of that private-public 60-60 partnership deal. Because these guys were making the 5G trusted decisions. The other key part of this multidimensional strategy is we started at the top. First folks we called on were the international organizations, NATO, the EU, the 3 Seas nations, and I'll never forget going over to NATO. And the Secretary General said to me, he goes, look, we need a clean NATO network because we need these 5G systems in peacetime or wartime, and we can't have some countries with trusted ones, some with untrusted ones, because you're only as strong as your weakest link. And that was key. And the reason why that was key is now it was not an America alone strategy. People support what they help create. And it provided a security blanket against China's intimidation, retaliation, and retribution. That was key. Another novel thing that we did is, in Silicon Valley, we facilitate industry standards. You set the rules of the ballgame. At DocuSign, we came up with a thing called the XDTM standard, which measured the level of trust in a digital transaction. And so we did the same thing with the Clean Network Trust Standards. And what that enabled countries and companies to do is to set that bar of trust without using China's name or Huawei's name, and set that bar so it was based on those democratic principles. So if you think about it, if I'm competing against you, and you can steal my intellectual property, you can use slave labor, you can use coal-fired power plants, you don't have to be transparent. You're going to win every time. They were doing that for their strategic advantage. What we did in one jiu-jitsu move, we flipped them on their back and used these trust principles, these democratic values, to our advantage. So if you think about it, we weaponized the very trust principles, democratic values that protect our freedom. That was the beauty about it. I could talk a long time about a lot of these strategies that we used, but suffice it to say, you don't have to have a PhD to understand that this strategic clean network engine was rooted in trust. Let's look at the results. So by the time our term was finished, on the clean network were 60 countries, representing 2/3 of the world's global GDP, 200 telcos, host of industry-leading companies. And we totally reversed Huawei's momentum. Those 91 5Gs went down to a couple dozen. So we did, for the first time, we proved China, Inc. is beatable. And in the process, we exposed their biggest weakness, which is lack of trust. And what we were able to provide is an enduring, proven model for all areas of economic competition. And we had already started on clean cloud, clean carrier, clean cable, clean infrastructure, clean energy. But perhaps most significantly is that this nonpartisan model provided a unity and continuity of policy between a Republican administration and a Democratic administration, which is so critical to our allies and actually strikes the fear in General Secretary Xi. So that's why it was the privilege of my life to be able to give back to the country that's given so much to my family and me, and to lead this great team of transformational leaders as they created this new form of transformational diplomacy, which is now known as techno-economic statecraft. And that's why I'm really thrilled to be the chairman of the Purdue Center for Technology Diplomacy, because what it's about is about building that bridge between the Silicon Valley playbook and foreign policy to advance freedom with our allies. So with that, I thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.